Check the West Tech Podcast.
Welcome to the West Tech Podcast, powered by West Recruitment. My name's Dean Mumford, the Director at West Technology. We sit down with highly accomplished leaders in the Sydney technology industry as they share their journeys and opinions on the direction of our industry. We hope you enjoy this conversation. So today we sit down with Matt Baker, who's the Applications Manager for Komatsu Australia. Matt's been with the Komatsu business for over 20 years, working across a number of roles in IT. He currently heads up the application team, which has around 100 people in it, delivering some really cool tech that helps Komatsu build strong embedded partnerships with their customers. Matt, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Excellent. So look, I'll start off with your early life. In a few words, tell us a little bit about yourself. Where did you grow up and about your childhood?
Yeah, so look, Sydney born and bred, local boy down south, but spent a lot of time in the West as I've gotten into my working career. So, yeah.
Excellent. What did you want to be when you were younger?
I always knew that I wanted to build things.
Mm-hmm.
I never quite had the idea of an engineer when I was a little kid, but I was kind of always fascinated with how things worked and, how things, pulling things apart and understanding what they look like and how to put them back together again, or maybe not, as the case may be.
All right. Well, being a tech podcast, I have to ask you, what was your first ever computer?
The Commodore 64, which I know dates me a little bit, but I was of that era.
Very, very common answer. I think they were probably the first mainstream computer people had in their homes.
Yeah, definitely.
Pretty
Definitely
exciting.
Great little computer.
And what was your first ever job?
So my first ever job, actually, before I got into a tech role, when I was at uni, used to go into the local newsagent, Saturday morning, bring in the papers, clean the store, get it all ready, and do a little bit of counter service. So great exposure into customer service.
Does that mean you're an early riser?
I am very much an early riser. The early bird catches the worm.
Absolutely. So in terms of your career, how did a career in IT come onto your radar?
Yeah, so picking up from what I was talking about before about, being a kid and understanding, how things work and wanting to kind of understand engineering, looked at a few different types of engineering, actually, when I was at school, mechanical, aeronautical, civil structural, and then I started to see the real potential and the real power of computers and this was something that was very different and had a lot of ability to make people's lives easier, make businesses run better. So that was kind of my entry point into saying, okay, well, I actually want to go to university, study engineering, study software engineering. Really great grounding and really great background to understand the technology more broadly. But more importantly, for my future career, engineering was really great for teaching me how to learn in the long term.
Did you think of the future when you were choosing your career path? You said, okay, which one has longevity in it? Or was it just more like, okay, I'm really interested in this, I want to see where it goes? Because I think the tech industry at the time was probably in its infancy.
Yeah. It was definitely a combination of both. It was, this is really something that lights me up and fascinates me, and the world of software and computers really, interested me. But also I could see huge potential, in terms of, where things could go in the future. I mean, did I know that AI was coming in the form that it is now, for example?
Mm-hmm.
Of course not. But you could just see on the cusp of people starting to use computers and doing more and more with it in their daily lives and their work. I'm like, there's something here. There's something that's going to keep me busy for a while.
What was the standard career path once you finished university for a career in technology?
Yeah, I mean, for a lot of people, I actually had a little bit of an atypical career path getting in. Did software engineering at uni. And so for a lot of people in my position, that would have been going straight into like an analyst programmer type role, getting involved in, coding business systems or, different apps, mobile apps, which were just starting to come onto the scene at the time. I actually took a different route. I actually fell into the world of infrastructure and operations, which was a little bit non-linear, but something that kind of interested in me at the time.
Did you see it as a grounding to help you go back to software, or was it just an opportunity and you said, okay, I want to see where this goes?
It was more the latter, actually. It sort of wasn't I didn't have a firm career path in mind. It was more, I'm a naturally curious person and I could sort of see potential in terms of, at that stage, there was a lot of networking starting to happen, people starting to bring computer systems together, and there was a lot of power in that at the time. It's, in today's terms, very foundational. But I could see there was a lot of potential there. So that's something that kind of interested me and drew me in.
So what was your first role?
So my first role was, I think it was a systems engineer role. So basically going around client compute, helping people get systems up and running. We had a lot of, the company that I was working for at the time used to subcontract a lot of different work for larger organizations. So I'd get to see a lot of different companies, how they were using technologies, get a feel for some of the challenges that they were having. So even though it was entry level in terms of desktop, infrastructure operations type support, it was a really good grounding in terms of understanding what's out there and what some of the possibilities were for technology.
Did that help you guide your career as to say, okay, well, I've seen what businesses do things really well and what maybe some that aren't doing so great? And did you say, okay, I can now identify which businesses I'd want to work for?
Yeah, 100%. So if I fast forward a few years to when the opportunity came to join Komatsu, I could see that was an opportunity where there was a business that was doing a lot. It was a growing business and still is. And I could see that they were really starting to lean into technology adoption. And it was, while it had the good broad grounding in terms of understanding what good looked like or what different looked like in different industries, different companies and how they were applying it, you get to a point where you kind of want to go a bit deeper. You want to get a little bit closer to the organisations. So while understanding technology more from a technology point of view is good to kind of get the lay of the land, at a point in time, you really want to get a little bit closer to the business, and that's where the interest started to develop a bit further.
So let's go back to you when you joined, because obviously you've been with the business for a long time. What did
Yes.
it look like when you first started?
Well, a lot smaller than it is today. So if I go back to when I first joined, it was probably about a quarter of the size that it is today in terms of headcount, in terms of revenue. So, much less mature organisation at that stage. So it was, there was a lot of rolling up your sleeves and kind of wearing multiple hats at the time because there wasn't that many people in the technology team. In line with headcount, we were quite a small team at that stage. So getting involved in all sorts of technologies when I first started.
So when you joined, you were in the network space, weren't
Correct.
you? And
Yes.
then obviously, I think you moved around in several roles. So talk me through some of the positions you've done there in your time.
Yeah, so spent a few years in the networking infrastructure operations, like a network engineer type role, and then saw an opportunity internally, had an opportunity to move into IT change management, so really starting to get involved in service management and service operations. That was a fairly short gig, and very soon after taking on that role, there was an opportunity to step up even further and actually take on a leadership position. So that was a service delivery manager role, essentially looking after client compute, the service desk, all the different client devices and things like that.
Having the background in infrastructure and networking, do you think that made that an easy transition for you? Understand the technical side of it, or?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely was, in terms of a step into leadership, it meant that I could really sort of lean into the leadership side of the journey rather than having to try and understand the technology and the leadership change at the same time. So it definitely meant that I could focus more on one area, which is the leadership, rather than trying to do everything at once.
Were you intentional about your career moves to round your skills off to help you advance, or was it just, look, an opportunity came up and you said, oh, okay, I'm going to pursue this and see where it takes me?
It's probably more the see where it takes me. I've never been a person, as I said, that the traditional career path for me would have been, uni degree, programming, analyst role, and then move up through that chain. For me, it was kind of where the curiosity took me. Curiosity is one of my core values, and so often it's not about planning the next career journey 5 years out. It's more about, okay, well, let's look into this space and get a different view on technology and how it's used, how it's operated, how it's brought into the business. So it was a good chance for me to start to just take different lenses on things and satisfy that curiosity. But then, as I understood more, have good conversations with the leaders around me, the people around me, to say, okay, well, what are some options that I could go to from here?
Great. And to talk about Komatsu, so, I mean, Komatsu Australia, they import and distribute earth-moving equipment.
Yes.
Obviously, you're looking at the industry. You don't really necessarily equate it to being sort of cutting-edge technology, but I think Komatsu will probably taken a slightly different approach to the way they use technology in their business.
Yeah, there's I think there's a bit of a common misconception when you look at earth moving equipment. You see it, on a construction site, on the side of the road, in a mine site, and you think, okay, big lump of iron. Fun fact: the T in Komatsu's actually got a little upturned tick on it. It's not for pronunciation; it's actually to denote where we position ourselves in terms of technology leadership. So if you think about some of the solutions that we bring to our business users and to our customers. For example, if I look at the top end of town in the mining sector, we've just globally commissioned our 1,000th autonomous haul truck globally. Now, we have over 500 of those running around in the Pilbara region where those big trucks with 200-300 ton payloads completely autonomously controlled, and that's been a solution that's been in place for over 10 years now.
Was Komatsu one of the first people to adopt that
Yes.
in the industry.
Yeah.
And so that was really a competitive advantage for the business.
Definitely.
And tell us a bit about how you use technology to embed Komatsu within their customers, like really forge that partnership. How does that work?
Yeah, it varies depending on the type of market segment that you're looking at. Because if you think about Komatsu and earth moving equipment, we're going all the way from the big tier one miners that we just talked about, all the way down to the small owner operators. You want to get some landscaping done at your home. Someone turns up with a small excavator on the back of the truck or the back of the ute. We go all the way down into that market segment. So where the technology enables will look a bit different, but there's some common themes. So for example, we do a lot of work with our business and investing in field service mobility, equipping the people with the right information, the right tools, the right diagnostics, so that they can get to the customer, get them back up and running. A big thing for us and for our customers is minimizing machine downtime, because that's lost productivity, their lost reputation, as well as potential revenue.
Wow. And so the IT applications manager position, tell me a bit about the team structure and what you're working on there at the moment.
Yeah, so in terms of the team, we essentially have a few key areas. We've got kind of what you call your traditional back office, core ERP, CRM. That's one big part of my team. We've got the integrations space sitting under me as well. So obviously linking all the key business systems together and allowing the business to execute end-to-end processes across systems. And then in addition to that, and this is the more recent addition to the team, is the digital space coming under my remit. So that's looking at things like workflows, intelligent automation, and then also looking at how do we support the business with operational technology. So still business-led development in a lot of situations, but increase in security, increase in wanting to make sure that we're governing things appropriately means that we now have some skin in that game as well.
So, covering IT and OT, how's the business, do they distinguish between the two definitively, or do they try and just treat them as one part of technology?
Yeah, they tend to distinguish to a point, but we're trying to work with them and establish like a common governance layer so that, we're making sure that when we're building things, we're building in a way that's safe, in a way that's secure. So there's a lot of crossover, even though it might sit under different business units, there's a lot of crossover underneath the hood, and we work quite hard to collaborate with those guys.
And what's the appetite like for delivering technology within the business? Is it just a core part of how the business functions, or is there a particular part of the business that drives this, or is it embraced by everybody?
Look, it's embraced by everybody. So, if you think about the concept of Kaizen, continuous improvement, something that's really, really embedded in our DNA. Komatsu actually won the Deming Prize. Everyone talks about Toyota and TQM. Mm-hmm. Komatsu actually won the Deming Prize the year before Toyota. So we don't tend to advertise it. We don't tend to put it out there so much, but that kind of concept of quality and continuous improvement is really embedded in our DNA. So to answer your question, it comes from all directions.
I think you might have missed an opportunity there, because I think that's what Toyota's known for. When
correct, yeah.
Komatsu practice, yeah.
We tend to be very understated in terms of how we market ourselves. So yeah.
So back to your career. What was the best career move you've ever made?
I think for me, it's actually coming into the current space that I'm in now. Every single one of the roles that I've done, I've loved. I've got a lot out of it. Really learned a lot. But for me, the journey has really been coming from a very technical background, as I said, starting in desktop support, infrastructure operations, network. They're all very good, very valuable things. So, and gave me a lot of good insights. But as I get further into my career, where I find the interest and the real value is understanding the business, getting closer to the business. So the application space, you really got to be interacting with your business stakeholders on a regular basis, because you're looking at business process improvement, technology adoption, to improve outcomes for customers, different business units, and so on. So that's where the interest has shifted for me.
Conversely, what's the worst job you've ever had?
Oh,
or the hardest, maybe?
The hardest, definitely. So if I go right back to the start of my career in terms of understanding different technology adoption by different companies. If I look at that organisation I was working in, they had a number of different customers, some quite big and reasonably mature, some very, very small and immature. Those were some tough days when, you're the only person on site and, something literally catches fire, or, probably not great from an OH&S point of view in today's terms, but I've had, computers blow up right next to my head when I've been trying to fix them and things like that. So
you're lucky
that gets you, yeah. There's a couple of times I think, wow, I'm glad that we're a little bit more advanced as an organisation on safety these days.
Absolutely. And in terms of leadership, how would you describe your leadership style?
Yeah, it's a good question. So what I would say is I try and anchor on a servant leadership mindset. To really, for me, it's really about empowering others. I'm really strong on that concept of leaders growing leaders. But having said that, I also take quite an adaptive approach as well, because while I want to support the teams, there's times where, you might get into a really tight situation and you've got to get a little bit more direct. Sometimes you might need to be more mentor-like. Sometimes you might need to be more coach-like. It really depends on what the needs of the circumstance, the project, the individual's needs are.
Are you someone that has a different style for each individual that works under you, or like you're able to adapt, or do you try and...
Yeah, to a degree. I mean, you want to be consistent in how you show up. You don't want to be 5 different leaders. So definitely I have a common approach, which is, as I said, more kind of that servant leadership style. But definitely I will adapt off that base as needed.
And is there a leader that you've worked with or aware of that's probably influenced your style at all?
Yeah, so look, definitely our current CIO, he's been fantastic. I mean, I've worked with him with a long time now, and he's someone who, is really good in terms of being very balanced in the way that he shows up. So creating a really safe space, someone that, if you need to bring bad news to them, you're going to get a consistent response. It's, you're not worried about, am I going to get the good boss or the angry boss or the bad boss? I've had that in the past with other organizations and other leaders. So someone who shows up consistently, for me, has been a fantastic role model in terms of, creating the right environment and the right culture for the broader team.
Yeah, I think it's very hard when you work with someone that their day is dependent on their moods, which obviously is going to impact your day and your team.
Definitely.
The way you get things done. So I think around sort of your leadership style, did you have a mentor coming through or someone that you sort of sought outside the organisation maybe for guidance?
Yeah, look, not in the early days, and I think that's been part of the learning journey for me too in those earlier days, particularly when I was in individual contributor roles. It was kind of, okay, well, I've got a problem, the customer's looking at me, I've got to fix the problem type thing. There's been a real mindset shift for me over my career. So in the last few years, yes, definitely I've got a couple of external mentors, external CIOs. I've got also an external career coach who helps me a lot, a leadership coach who helps me a lot in terms of processing, because I seem to keep getting more and more responsibilities and bigger teams to manage. So it is something that is really beneficial, and for people who are looking at a career in IT leadership or technology leadership, it's something that I'd strongly recommend that they invest in and look into.
At what point do you think they should engage somebody during their career?
Yeah, I think definitely when you're starting to manage some bigger teams. I mean, if I look at my first management or leadership role, it was only 4 direct reports. Probably not maybe not so much of a need there, but definitely as you start to lead teams of people rather than a team, I think that's a really good pivot point. It's something that, if I reflect, I wish that I actually would have done that sooner rather than tried to go it alone for as long as I did.
What's the hardest decision you've ever had to make as a leader?
I think for me, the hardest decision would be having to say to someone, look, it's time to go. So having that kind of redundancy type decision is really, really tough, because at the end of the day, while you can point to all the facts and you might have gone through all the right processes and given that person all the opportunities to improve, if I think back to a particular example, at a personal level, really nice person, but just wasn't coming on the journey with us and just basically wanted to keep doing work in a system that essentially we weren't using anymore. And that's tough because at the end of the day, you've worked with that person for a period of time, you get to know them, you understand that the decision you're going to make is going to have an impact on their livelihood and on their career as well, potentially. So it's something that, you never really want to enter into lightly and really want to consider the consequences of those decisions.
It's funny, I guess, the more time you spend as a leader, they are the difficult days. But sometimes, what is really tough and you have to let somebody go that, you like or is doing or trying really hard or maybe they're just not up to the role.
Yes.
I think in hindsight, the amount of times we hear about people going, thank you, because
True.
I wasn't right. I found another role where they were well suited and they thrived, and they probably knew they were failing where they were. And I think the fact you made the call, allowed them to move on to the next thing.
Yeah.
And I think that there is something powerful in that. It's whilst it's hard at the time, I think it can be beneficial. We hope you're enjoying this episode of the West Tech Podcast. To stay updated with our latest episodes, please click, follow, and subscribe to help us grow our community.
100%. And that's actually what happened in this particular example that I'm thinking of is that person actually took the opportunity to retrain, move into a different field. It's completely outside of technology and from what I understand has done quite well in that space, which is,
Found their niche. That's great.
Yeah.
When you're looking to grow your team,
Mm.
what do you look for? What sort of traits do you look for in a potential team member?
Yeah, one of the things that I'm very big on is growth mindset. So a few years back, I actually said to everyone in my team, I said, if you want to lead, or even if you want to be in an individual contributor role, every PD that goes out now, if I'm getting a new role in the team, one key requirement is always a growth mindset and learning orientation. I want to be able to see that in someone, whether that's a new hire, whether that's someone moving from an individual contributor to a leadership role. For me, technology moves so fast. Our business is always evolving. There's always new challenges that we need to solve for our customers. If someone isn't willing to learn and adapt and grow, doesn't mean that they have to be looking to climb the ladder. It could just be staying in their role and broadening their and deepening their expertise. There's power in both of those career paths.
Do you encourage sort of self-driven learning in your environment?
Yeah, 100%. So whether that's experimentation, whether that's self-study, typically I'd prefer a combination of both of those things because it's great that someone wants to get like a certification, for example, as an entry point. But to me, that's just saying, okay, well, I've got the old plates on. I'm now in a position where I can actually start to experiment and really do something real with this learning.
I think that's very current. And I think that's something that I think a lot of IT professionals coming through need to embrace because you're right. I think technology is changing so fast.
Yeah.
And I think you almost need to have a future-proof mindset at the moment is what I'm going to do. Is it going to be around in 3 to 5 years? Because 3 to 5 years ago, no one's thinking like this. And then you've got all these technologies and AI coming through that it's changing the way we work.
Yeah. I mean, I think my view on it is I don't necessarily see it as, I actually don't see it to be quite direct as a replacement. I definitely see evolution in roles. I don't think that we're in a situation where it's going to, replace people per se. Roles will evolve, roles will shift, but that's happened if I look back over my career, that's happened on a consistent basis as new technologies have come in terms of web and SaaS and, cloud services, things like that. Some roles, yes, have been reduced in terms of their need, but then conversely, there's new opportunities have opened up, and that's what I see happening here.
Now, sort of asking your opinion and thoughts on certain things. If you've got a really good performer in your team, do you think that naturally translates into a good leader if you're looking for leadership skills?
No, not necessarily. So they can be technically strong. Are they a good fit for a leadership position? Possibly, but not necessarily. Couple of points on that. So firstly, if they're really, if I see in them, yes, strong technically, but also they really are asking the right questions in terms of, what does leadership mean, looking at how they're treating one another, treating other people in the team. Potentially that gives me some signals that they could step up into a leadership position. But there's also a risk with that as well, because if you've got your high achiever technical person in a leadership role, that can lead to them setting a really, really high speed of pace. And that can actually have a negative effect on the team in the sense that, we can't keep up with the boss. And, so you can get into that trap where you have, the one expert that everyone starts to lean on. Not particularly healthy in some respects because, you want to be able to have a team that is building capability amongst themselves to go on this, yes, all march in the same direction, but not get into a situation where they're just leaning on that one person all the time.
And what character traits do you look for in your people that identifies they might have some potential to lead?
So definitely looking at, okay, well, what are the questions they're asking of me in terms of their career development and other leaders as well. The people that I see moving up into leadership positions are asking really good questions in terms of looking at the leaders around them and identifying the traits that they like and they may not like in other leaders that are in the organisation or that they see just generally around the outside of IT. So the people that are having sort of those questions and coming to me and asking me questions about those sorts of things, that's a really strong sign. I think also looking at how are they actually collaborating with others around them. Are they trying to take the lead? Are they trying to take the glory? Or are they someone who's willing to really bring people together to achieve a good outcome without necessarily expecting the praise or the pat on the back?
There's different personality types operate very differently.
100%.
Yeah. Looking at your own success throughout your career, what do you think the main sort of character trait that you've had that has sort of allowed you or helped you be successful in what you've done?
Yeah, I think that comes back to a couple of things. And if I reflect back on my core values around curiosity, growth, and challenge, taking the opportunity, asking the question to kind of, maybe jump in on something that I might not be quite ready for, but, I've taken a bit of a leap on. So, for example, that first management position that I had, that was a conversation that almost didn't come about, but I took a deep breath and jumped in and asked a couple of questions, and the next thing, the opportunity came in my direction.
Oh, so you drove that. You said, hey, look, what are the chances of me potentially being able to spearhead this?
100%.
Okay.
100%.
Yeah. So that would have been like very nerve-wracking at the time, I'm sure.
Yeah, because I hadn't led before, I hadn't managed people before, and I wasn't really quite sure what I was getting myself in for.
Was it something that you thought I could be really good at this, or you're like, I just need to try this to help me round off in terms of your skills?
I could see that I could bring benefit to the role, so I didn't just go into it blindly thinking, oh yeah, I'll be awesome at this. There wasn't arrogance in that. There definitely humble confidence, maybe that okay, I've got some skills here. I've worked with people. I've achieved some good outcomes informally leading the team. Maybe I can do something more here. Definitely, to your point though, there's definitely that sense of curiosity. Is hey, that really interests me, and I really want to learn more about that space and get involved.
What do you think the biggest challenges facing the IT industry are today?
I think definitely AI, to come back to what we were talking about, is one thing. I think there's a lot of expectation in terms of delivery at the moment, but what I see, and I'm talking in a very broad context here, not specifically in a Komatsu context, but when I talk to my network, when I go to events, there's a lot of hype around, hey, we're doing all these cool things, but the reality is, you get people behind closed doors, everyone's like, yeah, we're all in the same boat. We're all still trying to figure out all those things that go alongside of it in terms of governance and ethics and accountability. I think, balancing that demand to deliver versus having the right infrastructure in place, and I'm not talking technical infrastructure, but organizational infrastructure in place to allow that to be sustainable and really deliver value in the long run is a really big challenge. I think that's something that, as technology professionals and technology leaders, we definitely have more work to do there. But also working with other parts of our organisations, like your HR team, like your change team. As I said before, I think that there's definitely roles that are going to change, roles that are going to evolve, roles that are going to adapt. Are we necessarily equipping our teams and our people organisationally for that? I don't know that we're quite there yet.
What do you think, whether it's Komatsu or another environment, full utilisation of AI in a typical corporate, where do you think it finishes? What do you think it looks like?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I don't think that we really quite know the answer to that yet. I see that we're moving out of the era of individual productivity gains, your co-pilots and using your ChatGPTs or Claudes at an individual level. I think we're starting to enter the era of kind of that teamwork collaboration. What that looks like in terms of taking that to the next level when you're talking organizational wide, I think that comes down to what's the organization's ability and willingness to adapt, in the sense that, if I take it back to an example of transformation, there's a little meme that probably most people have seen over the years where it talks about, what people think transformation is versus what it actually is. People think transformation is kind of getting the caterpillar and strapping some rockets and a roller skates on it and sending it down the road, whereas transformation is really the caterpillar and metaphor, going through metamorphosis into the butterfly. If I bring that to the AI example, I think if we keep chasing quick wins and just trying to speed up current processes, I think we'll fall into a bit of an electricity trap. So if you think about the early days of the Industrial Revolution, electricity coming along, people really didn't do much with their factories. They just kind of put electrical connections and electrical machines into each individual spot in that factory. Yeah, they sped up their process and they sped up their output to a point, but it wasn't until they fundamentally rethought that whole factory and what does that look like with electrification as the foundation. That's where the real value came from. And that's, I think, the leap that a lot of organisations are yet to fully comprehend and fully realise.
I don't think there's a gold standard. I think it's come about too fast.
Definitely. And at the end of the day, you're right. It's evolving so quickly. Even from a technology point of view, the challenge is, you start to build and then you sort of think to yourself, okay, well, is what we're building here still going to be relevant in 6 months' time, or will it have been completely superseded by a different set of standards or approaches or all those things? So you can't not do it, but you're always kind of trying to keep one eye on the future as to what's coming.
Especially if you're midway through work, if what you're finishing,
100%.
Is it going to be used for the business for the better, or is it going to just be superseded? I think you're right. From an application context, what do you think best practice looks like in 2026 for an environment, from an application standpoint?
Yeah, look, I think definitely having good, strong governance and all those things that are really unexciting, but essential, foundational pieces. Good governance, understanding your data, where it's coming from, where it's going to. So data lineage, security, all those. If you've got strong foundations in your application development stack, then that sets you up well, I think, for leveraging AI more in the future. Because again, if you've got poor process and you put AI over that, it's just going to accelerate the
compound.
Correct. It's that whole technical debt story all over again in a new era, just at larger scale than before.
And do you think less applications is the future, or do you think more SaaS, or do you think more of a hybrid mix?
Yeah, look, I think it really depends on the organisation. I think certainly, yes, SaaS brings its benefits, but it can also get quite costly if you're not careful with that. So, we take a hybrid approach. I've seen other organisations, I've heard about other organisations actually pulling back for SaaS because the cloud costs just get so high for running particular workloads. Certain, government, for example, will have very, very specific requirements. So I think it's very much a case of what's right for that company. I don't think there's any one right answer. Definitely, if I look at more the applications landscape that we have, one of the things we're trying to do is to consolidate applications, to simplify business process. Again, coming back to that point of having a cleaner estate so that you can do more with AI enablement. But that's a longer term journey for us.
So back to yourself, if you were starting your career in IT today, how would you approach things differently? Obviously, understand the industry is vastly different. Technology is a much, much bigger and more integrated part of our lives daily. But what would you do differently?
Look, I think certainly I would, things I wouldn't change, things like studying engineering. As I said, really great foundational practice. Even though engineers don't tend to come out with the latest technology and whatnot, there's a really powerful thing there, which is learning how to learn. That's what, one of the key things that I took from an engineering degree. So that I wouldn't change. In terms of what I would change, though, is definitely getting that business understanding a lot earlier. Very early on in my career, it was all about PCs and client compute and networks and infrastructure, and I had a very, very technical view of the world. I think if I was doing my time over again, I would have got much, much closer to the business much, much sooner and really understood the real value and the real power. It was not about the shiny toys that are sitting in the server rack. It's about what business outcomes is that actually delivering for the organisation.
Right. What value or emphasis do you place on qualifications if you're starting out your career?
Look, I think it definitely helps. I'm not saying it's the be all and end all. If I go way, way back, I remember working with people who did all their Microsoft suite of exams, and I thought, hired this person. I thought they're going to be awesome, and then the first day they had to ask me, how do I create a login account? And I thought, well, something's gone wrong here.
Okay, yeah.
So, it comes back to that part of, ideally, if they've got some certifications that shows, that they're committed, but definitely if they've got some experience to show, that helps. But if not, even just finding out, okay, well, what are you learning about in your spare time, even if you're not working in the field? Even just this week, I've been interviewing some candidates for an entry-level role that we've got And, the candidates, the ones that are getting the conversations with me, are the ones that even just in their own personal lives, they can talk to something real that they've experimented with. It shows that passion for learning. It shows that passion for the technology and understanding what it could do.
I think as a recruiter, putting my recruitment hat on, it's very interesting to see, because I think technology is unique in the sense that some people are fantastic with technology because it's just naturally they're gifted with it, but they're not academic. So, and then you've got other people that are really academic, but they have to work harder at the technical concepts and the practical application of those. And it's very hard to sort of distinguish which would be better in the long run, because I think it does come down to the individual.
Definitely.
And I think sometimes the people who have done Microsoft certs are maybe better than the people that have done a degree. So you go, okay, is the degree maybe not relevant for where is academia keeping up with where the market is headed? Like, I think business is an imperative part of all degrees.
Definitely. I think they're definitely evolving. So, one of the things that was interesting, again, when I was talking to some candidates this week, one of them talking about the fact that there's an expectation, for example, in software engineering degrees that you are vibe coding, which really surprised me, because I thought, hang on a second.
It's counterintuitive, isn't it?
It is a bit counterintuitive, but it's really them trying to embrace and say, okay, well, let's use the tools to learn, to experiment, to prototype, not to maybe build the finished product, but really understand that, hey, our world is evolving. We need to move with that rather than just stick to, what we've been teaching and the approaches we've been teaching for the last 15, 20 years.
I think AI is probably the tip, is for development, is the tip of the spear. I think in terms of technology jobs, I think they're the most impacted developers at the moment. And you've got developers that are like, well, no, I don't trust AI because the code's wrong, or there's 8 out of 10 instead of 10 out of 10. And then you've got people that go, well, I'm going to harness it to help me be better at developing because it's not going to rule them out. They go, okay, well, you're not getting rid of me as a developer. It just means that I'm able to do more faster and to a higher standard.
Yeah, and that's really, I see where the power is. It's not about, I think we're, as an industry, if we're not careful, we're heading for a real challenge in, sort of 5 or so years' time, because if we're not hiring those junior developers, we still need people to build that experience. Yes, AI is getting more capable. I'm seeing, the senior developers essentially move up the stack and becoming more architect-like. I'm not saying I'm expecting them to be full architects, but they're becoming more architect-like. To your point, they're looking at the outputs. They're using the AI tools to improve the quality of what they're delivering. If we're not careful, and if as an industry we're not feeding that pipeline, what happens in 5 or 10 years' time when we need the next round of mid-level developers? I think we're potentially heading for a bit of a resourcing crunch.
We have had those skill shortages before.
Yeah,
and there's no clean answer to get in or out. I think it's very hard, and salaries go through the roof because it's supply and demand.
100%.
And so, what was the best advice you've ever received? It doesn't have to be personal, career. It could be anything.
I think for me, the best advice I've received is be yourself, be authentic. Don't try and pretend who you're not. Don't try and be who you're not. So show up as you are, and people will take you as they take you. If you're trying to pretend, then eventually that comes out, right? So for me, that's a key one, is trying to be as authentic as I can be.
Great, that's really good advice. If you could have dinner with anybody, who would it be and why?
Oh, this is a really good question. I think it would be really interesting to have dinner with someone like, maybe like a Steve Jobs, not that obviously he's with us anymore, or a Bill Gates, some of those really early visionaries in when technology was just starting to really get going in the 80s and 90s. Some fascinating people with a lot of foresight about where technology was going, what it could do. Maybe didn't quite, in Steve Jobs' case, didn't quite live to see its full potential unveiled. But I think being able to really talk to some of those guys would be a fantastic opportunity.
They're visionaries.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah, which is interesting. I think, obviously, Bill Gates is no longer involved with Microsoft.
No,
he's into some other things at the moment. I think he's
philanthropic.
Philanthropic. Yeah. But last question, and I think this is probably very telling, and I think it's something that probably holds a lot of power as well. But what advice would you give your 20-year-old self?
I think for me, be a little more confident. Back yourself a little bit more. I think in those early days, as I said, I've got to solve every problem. I've got to try and do all this myself. So be a bit confident in your own capability, but also don't be afraid to ask.
I think the hindsight of aging is you do become comfortable in your own skin. So I think what you're saying there is very, very common.
Yeah.
And there's a word now, imposter syndrome.
Yep.
And
Very
I think
valid.
anybody that's successful has at some point questioned if they're deserving of where they're at and what they're doing. And you tend to find the higher the performer, the bigger the imposter syndrome. And I really sort of, I find psychologically it's very difficult to deal with because it does hold you're holding yourself back effectively. And I think if you were able to sort of talk to your 20-year-old self and say, look, everything's going to be okay. We're actually going where we want to go and it's going to be fantastic. I think that would be liberating almost.
Yeah, I think that's a really good observation. And yeah, as I said, see that in myself and see that in other leaders that I've talked to over the years as well.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much for being a guest on the West Tech podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's been great.
Matt, I look forward to seeing where you go to next with your career.
Thank you very much, Dean.
Thanks. Have a great day.
Cheers. You too.
Bye. We hope you've enjoyed this episode of the West Tech podcast. Please don't forget to follow, like, and subscribe if you'd like to hear more from IT leaders who are driving our industry. For more details of West Technology and how we can help you with your own career or to solve hiring issues for your IT team, visit us at westrecruitment.com.au.